for New York and sending a message to the nation.
Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Dan Clark. 2/3 of New Yorkers don't want colleges to reopen for in-person learning this year. That's according to a new Siena poll this week. It's a little late for that. Colleges in New York started classes last week. And those who didn't want colleges to reopen this year had their worst fears confirmed at one campus. More than 300 students at SUNY Oneonta tested positive for the coronavirus just in the last week. Governor Cuomo said the state will continue to monitor the infection rate at campuses, but he also said he wasn't surprised by the spike in cases.
I believe colleges are the canary in the coal mine. I believe what you're seeing across the nation is going to continue, where colleges open, students come back, congregate settings, socialization, the infection rate goes up.
So that was earlier in the week. Later in the week, the governor held a surprise conference call with reporters and called President Trump a clown, a joke, and the worst president in history for New York City. With me in studio to discuss is Marina Villeneuve from the Associated Press. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course.
So this call blew me away. It was Wednesday evening, 7:30 p.m. We got like 10 minutes notice of it, and we know when that happens that it's going to be important for the governor. And he comes on, and I think a lot of us knew that the president was threatening to cut funding for New York City because of the rise in crime. But then the governor just went into a series of personal attacks. What did you think?
Yeah, I think it was definitely something a little bit more than we've heard from the governor in regards to the president. It was, the governor was saying that if that the president couldn't have enough bodyguards if he were to go into New York City.
That was a really interesting comment.
Yeah.
And I think what he meant was like people would be shouting at him and jeering at him, but it came off as the governor saying that he was going to need like personal security protection from like harm if he went into New York City, which got a lot of backlash in the tabloids, I think.
Yes, and I think, the governor's spokesman later clarified that the governor was really talking about how he feels that the president abandoned New York in the pandemic and overall has left just a lot of responsibility to the states.
So listening to the call, I'm reminded of March and April when the governor was basically praising the president because he had met with the president to get things like the medical naval ship to New York to handle hospitalizations and some temporary hospitals. This is very different. And what strikes me is we're at a time right now where the governor is trying to get federal funding for the state to the tune of $53 billion. How do you think this affects that? Are we going to see an impact on whether the state actually gets that money?
Yeah, right. And, the governor definitely was saying at the beginning of the pandemic that he wanted to suspend any sort of personal grudge and any sort of issues with the president. And the two, were really trying to work together on getting ventilators and hospital beds. When it comes to the risk of federal funding, at this point, I don't think there's anything to suggest that federal funding really will get cut for New York, especially when it comes to, federal funding for law enforcement grants. That could be something that could definitely hurt New York City as it's trying to do everything from address the rise in shootings to allowing maybe indoor dining one day.
Right, and we had the Attorney General say on Thursday that if the president did go forward with those cuts, that she would definitely be filing a lawsuit, which I'm not surprised about. Let's turn to the SUNY system because classes have only been in session for 2 weeks. SUNY Oneonta now has more than 300 cases, and that didn't strike me as a party school. I'm actually from that area, and I know that parties happen there, but I think of where I live now in Albany, where we have kids having parties every weekend on Hudson Avenue, just like ragers going. And I wonder if we're going to see the same thing in Albany. What's SUNY doing?
Yeah, it seems like now SUNY has announced all these different measures to try to increase testing and make it a lot easier to do multiple tests at once and to do saliva tests. But it looks like most SUNY institutions and community colleges, they didn't require students to get tested before they started going back to campus as of mid-August. And we've just started to see so many issues and a number of public universities and institutions sort of announce that they're suspending students.
Right. Well, we'll have to see how it turns out in the next few weeks as classes continue. Marina Villeneuve from the Associated Press, thanks so much.
Thank you.